Hi guys, welcome to this quick tutorial on how I draw dogs in graphite pencils. So jumping straight into it, here are the tools that I used to create these portraits. When I first started I only used mechanical pencils, so if you haven't got all this, don't worry, you can literally just use one pencil if that's all you have. So this tool I'm holding here is a blending tool. It's from Jackson's Art. It's basically one of those old cheap eyeshadow applicators on a big stick, so I wouldn't really recommend paying the price I did for this, but I use it to blend loose graphite, which I use in this drawing to get down the shadowed areas right in the beginning, just to map that out. It's not great for achieving dark shadows as it's quite light when it hits the paper, as you'll see. This one's just a silicone blending tool. It's really nice for getting really smooth blends in smaller areas. It works on the surface of the paper, whereas the paper stumps work to blend the graphite into the paper. So this is a really nice tool. I really recommend getting this. Them two both come in a set, so I'll link that in the description below. And I'm sure most of you have used these before. They're just regular paper stumps, great for blending larger areas. Onto the shadows. This is just a black polychromos from Faber Castell. I really like using these to get down some really dark shadows in the beginning, like the nostrils where no light hits those areas. So you really need a dark tone there. This one's basically a fatter version of that. The only thing with using these is that you do have to go back over the top with graphite, just so that the pencil shine on the whole portrait is consistent. This next pencil, it's a Staedtler Mars Lumograph pencil. These are meant to have a higher carbon content so that they're darker, but to be honest I haven't really found that they're much different to normal pencils. It is a nice pencil, 6B pencil, but I don't know, it's not much different, I found. And this is just a regular 8B pencil from Faber Castell. Now onto the mid-tones. These are pencils that I found in the drawer. I'd never used these before this, but they're really nice for getting a sharp point, so I quite enjoyed using them on this portrait. They're just like woodless graphite pencils, I think they're called, in all different grades there. This one is a Faber Castell 2H. This is what I use for most of the lighter fur areas and where there's reflections. 2H is probably my favourite grade for this. I also use H and B for that. And onto the main star of the show. These are what I've been using for about 10 years. I used to only use these, so you know, if this is all you can afford, then just get these. I think they're about £20 and they come in a pack of 3. So it's 0.5mm, the one I use the most, and it also comes with a 0.35mm, which I found just snapped so much, so I gave up with it. But yeah, I use 2 B leads in these, and I'll link all of this in the description below. They're really great for small details, so you don't have to keep sharpening them. I hate sharpening pencils so much. I recently bought a really expensive electric sharpener which broke within a week, so I'm trying to get that sorted out. And yeah, these are just the leads that I use with those pencils. I really like this brand, Pentel, and then there's Koh-i-Noor. I've never known how you say that, but these ones are quite good as well, really cheap. To the highlights now. So we've got a Faber Castell Perfection rubber pencil. It's basically like a coloured pencil eraser but in a pencil, so you can sharpen it to a really fine point and you can use this to get highlights in the fur. And for the smaller like specks of highlight, I use this on like the eyes. 0.8 Jelly Roll. They're really good. I prefer the 0.5 one because it's a bit thinner, but I find the 0.5 runs out so fast, so I've given up. And I just have a paintbrush to the side whenever I do graphite portraits to brush away any rubbings, because if you use your hand it's just going to smudge. So now I'm going to show you how I render some of the fur textures. I basically use this hand movement. It's really hard to describe in a video. So you start with no pressure, in the middle you have the most pressure, and then at the end you go back to no pressure again. So it's kind of like a up and down movement with the pencil. And then I basically just carry this technique on for the entire portrait, really. Sorry if my voice has just changed. This is a different time. I've just carried on the video and I've got a cold now, so yeah, as I'm showing you here, it's just faster versions of that movement all together, and I think there's probably about 1 million of these in every portrait, but I find that this gives the softest fur texture rather than just doing, you know, one directional lines. And as you're doing this, you should kind of mix up the direction that you're going in, because then obviously fur, it doesn't go in one direction, it's not perfect, so really make sure you've got different directions in that same area to make it look the most realistic that it can be. And obviously for lighter fur, all I do is release some of that pressure. As you can see here, I'm just repeating that over and over again, and we've got a nice little section of fur here, which looks really nice and soft. And the natural placement of the pencil will mean that you've got some lighter strokes and some highlights within those strokes, which can look like certain strands are reflecting the light, which is just what we want. And now I'm going to show you a different technique that I use. I use this a lot on snouts and places where fur is kind of parting at a different angle. Sorry, my rat is chewing this wooden thing. Dave, stop it. Of all times. So yeah, basically I just do little triangle shapes, and that it looks like the hair is kind of parting, which is what would happen when the hair is like going over a lump or a bump in the fur. So if you've got like the snout, for example, it's curved and the hair won't just be going in one direction, it'll be separating and, you know, compensating for those hills and valleys in the dog's face. I'm not on it today. So right now, after that I just use the silicone stump to blend out any lighter areas, because that wanted to be a darker section. And here I'm showing how I do like a longer fur with a reflection in it. So you start with the harder texture on the outside, and then you just stroke inwards, releasing pressure as you go inwards. And here's some loose graphite that I'm applying with a makeup sponge blender thing. This is funny because I made this video so long ago, and now I'm just finishing it, and so I'm just kind of narrating as I go along. So here we have the pencil eraser. This is a pink one. They have a white one as well, which actually works better with graphite. The pink one is meant to be for coloured pencil, but yeah, I recommend the white one and the pink one actually, just to see which one you prefer. I use this technique here for lighter fur. So you get the graphite down first and then you just erase and make highlights that way. Can be a really handy tool. And then I'm just adding some shadows to further enhance that section. This is a really good technique for white dogs. For paper as well, this looks like quite a textured paper I'm using here. I think it was just a scrap that I had, but the smoother the paper the better if you're looking for that real smooth look to your portrait. It can be too smooth though, and sometimes with really smooth papers like the Frisk smooth paper, it doesn't take many layers because it doesn't have much of a tooth and it can start to rub away. So I would recommend something like Bristol Board Smooth or Bristol Board Vellum. Or you can get some really cheap ones as well, but anyway, so onto the dog now, and I'm just starting with the shadows in his ear. I do normally start with the left ear because I'm right-handed, so I'll be working left to right, or left down and then right. And as you can see, I'm using the triangular texture method on the ear because the fur is going around the ear fold. So you want to really illustrate that parting of the fur. To block out that white bit in the middle of his head, I'm just working in the negative, so you're putting in the shadows just to show that there's a highlight there, and doing that all in the direction of the fur that you can see. I zoom in right up close to my reference photo so I can really see the direction of that fur. And onto the eye, I tend to get the real shadowed parts down first, paying real attention to where the highlight of that eye is, because once you've gone over the highlighted parts, it's really hard to get them back. So you want to keep the brightest bits bright. And for that whisker you've just seen me putting on the left, I've used the gel pen. And onto the other eye, I tend to keep the bottom section of the eye lighter, even if it isn't in the picture, because that can make the eyes look really gem-like, and you know, like the light's coming from a nice direction, and it just looks quite classic. So here I'm using a mixture of the first technique that I showed you with the graduating pressure and the triangle technique that I showed you for the bits going up the head where the curvature of the skull is apparent there. As you can see, I'm using mostly the mechanical pencil because it's so thin. You can really get those fine details. This was actually a smaller piece as well. I think it was a A5 one. So this is really quite a small area. So getting that detail was quite hard, but we managed it with that 0.5mm mechanical pencil. I think the main tip I'd give to graphite artists, if you're just starting off or if you just want to learn something new, basically just zoom right into your reference photo and work one bit at a time. So put all of your energy into that one section and then move on to the next one, rather than trying to look at the whole thing and, you know, work section from section, because you can get distracted and then you end up with a piece that isn't as detailed as you wanted it to be. And it does take time. I mean, this probably took me about, probably about 15 hours for this A5 piece. And you've got to kind of get used to that thought that you're going to be here for the long haul. It's never going to be a quick process if you want to work in realism. Here I'm coming onto the nose, and I'm just getting the mid-tones down first. I tend to get the mid-tones down and then blend it, and then the shadows and then blend it. And I keep the lights light. I'm going to do a whole tutorial, I think, on noses, because it's an easy process once you know it, but there's a really good trick to do them, to get those textures in, to make it really realistic, especially in graphite. I think graphite noses are probably my favourite thing to do. The bits around the nose, the triangle texture method works really well, because there tends to be some lighter hairs around there, so you need to work in that negative space again. You also want to be really cautious of where your hand is resting. So here I've got a little plastic sleeve that I'm resting my hand on, but your paper will get so smudgy if you don't rest your hand on something. And here I'm using the triangle texture, as I said I would, on the snout. For the white areas, I've used the triangle texture again. How many times am I going to say that in this video? But just very light pressure. And I'm just carrying on, looking at those smaller areas, filling in bits as I see them. I do tend to work jump from area to area, even though I've just told you not to. I don't know, I can never decide which bit I want to start on. Obviously you can do that, but just make sure you're really looking at the hair direction and what's going on with that hair and where the light's hitting the hair. I really love doing collars, because it's just a bit of different texture to get into rather than fur. Tip for when you're doing collars is to really look at the texture in those as well, because if you get the realism on the collar perfect, it can really complement the rest of the piece and take that realism to the next level. For this bit here, I've coloured it in using some loose graphite, and I'm just lightly because of the body. You don't want it to be too sharp, so I tend to smudge out the body part a bit more. It just gives a nice graduation to the paper. So I hope you've learned something from this. Let me know what you thought, and if there's anything else you kind of want to see. Yeah, it was really lovely drawing to do this one. Nice small piece that I could really get into the details with. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video, hopefully. See you later.